Picture this. You finally gather the courage to confront someone in your life about something hurtful they did.
Right. Which is incredibly hard to do.
It is. You've been agonizing over this for days. You've, planned out exactly what you're going to say. You're calm, you're reasonable, and you approach them with the absolute best of intentions.
You just want to clear the air.
Yeah, exactly. You just want to fix it. But somehow, like 20 minutes later, the conversation has completely flipped. Your head is spinning. The original issue hasn't even been addressed. And, well, the wildest part, you are the one apologizing to them.
Yeah. It is a profoundly disorienting experience.
Yeah.
I mean, you walk away from that interaction feeling like the physical ground just shifted beneath your feet.
Oh, 100%.
You find yourself questioning your own memory,
Yeah.
your own perception of reality. You're just wondering, wait, what just happened in that room?
And usually when we talk about a miscommunication with someone, there's this expectation of precision. It's almost like troubleshooting a machine.
Right. You find the broken part.
Exactly. You have a breakdown in communication, you look at the parts, you identify the misunderstanding, and you fix it. But when you step into the world of chronic emotional evasion, when you are dealing with someone who simply cannot and will not take responsibility, that clean logic just completely disintegrates.
It vanishes. Because what you are dealing with in those moments isn't a simple misunderstanding. It's not a glitch. You are colliding with an invisible, highly complex architecture of psychological defense mechanisms.
Which is terrifying when you don't know it's there.
It really is. And our default assumption as human beings is that when someone twists reality to avoid blame, they are doing it out of, well, pure calculated malice.
Right. We assume they know they are wrong.
Yes. We assume they know they hurt you and they are just choosing to be manipulative.
Which is such a natural conclusion to draw when you're the one getting hurt. I mean, it feels so intentional.
But assuming it's purely malicious actually keeps you trapped.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the mission of our deep dive today.
Yes, let's get into it.
The overarching reality we need to establish right now, based on decades of clinical psychology, attachment theory, all the sources we are looking at today, is this. Toxic evasive behavior is rarely about conscious malice.
Okay.
Instead, it is a highly evolved, incredibly primitive survival mechanism. It is an unconscious system designed to protect a profoundly fragile ego from what it perceives as absolute psychological annihilation.
That is, wow, psychological annihilation. So we aren't just looking at the surface behaviors today.
Not at all. We are going down to the studs.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, because if we want to understand why a partner or a parent or a boss fundamentally cannot accept blame, why they treat a simple, hey, you hurt my feelings, like a literal life or death attack,
Yeah.
we have to look at the terror that accountability triggers in them.
All right.
In the literature, this is often traced back to the emotionally immature mind. So what is actually happening inside their head when you ask them to take responsibility?
To understand the sheer terror of that moment for them, we have to look at the fundamental clinical difference between guilt and shame.
Which people confuse all the time.
Constantly. In everyday language, we use those words completely interchangeably. But in psychology, they are entirely different experiences. Guilt is considered an adaptive, behavior-focused emotion.
Meaning it's actually helpful.
Yes, it's healthy.
Yeah.
When you feel guilt, your internal monologue is, I did a bad thing.
It targeted the action, not who I am as a person.
Exactly. Because it targets the action, your core identity remains perfectly intact. You still feel like a relatively good person who just, made a mistake.
Right.
And because of that, guilt motivates what we call prosocial behavior. It leads you to make repairs, to offer a genuine apology, to learn from the event, and to grow.
It's the feeling of accidentally stepping on someone's foot. You feel a flash of guilt. You say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You step back and you move on. The relationship is repaired in 2 seconds.
Exactly. But shame is entirely different. Shame is a maladaptive, identity-focused emotion.
Identity focus.
Yes, the internal monologue of shame isn't, I did a bad thing. The monologue is, I am a bad person. I am inherently flawed. I am defective. I am fundamentally unworthy of love, respect, or belonging.
So when you confront an emotionally immature person, they aren't feeling guilt. They are instantly flooded with shame.
They were drowning in it.
But what is the actual mechanism making them twist reality instead of just, dealing with the shame?
We could look at Leon Festinger's classic theory of cognitive dissonance to explain the mechanics here.
Oh, cognitive dissonance. That's a big one.
It is. It's the intense psychological distress we feel when we hold two contradictory beliefs at the exact same time. If an individual has a fragile ego, they often overcompensate by needing to believe they are a flawless, perfectly good person.
That rigid perfectionism is basically their armor.
Exactly. Now imagine you come to them and say, "You lied to me yesterday and it hurt."
So the two realities collide. I am perfect crashes right into I did something harmful.
And those two realities simply cannot coexist. The dissonance creates an overwhelming psychological
So
crisis.
how do they resolve it?
Well, the research outlines this sequence perfectly through the appraisal anxiety avoidance model. When this type of mind is confronted with a mistake, they don't appraise it as a simple human error. They appraise it as a fatal threat to their self-worth.
A fatal threat.
Yes, and this appraisal triggers a massive spike in anxiety. We're not talking about mild discomfort here. We are talking about a sympathetic nervous system fight-or-flight response. Adrenaline, cortisol, a racing heart.
They are reacting as if a tiger just walked into the room, but the tiger is just, well, it's just you asking for an apology.
To the immature mind, shame feels like the threat of total relational banishment. In our evolutionary past, being banished from the tribe literally meant death.
Right, you couldn't survive alone.
So their brain registers the feeling of shame as a literal threat to their survival. And to survive, the brain immediately deploys the third step of the model, which is avoidance. They must avoid accountability at all costs to neutralize the threat.
You know, it makes me think of guilt as being like a buggy app on your phone.
Okay, I like that.
You open the app, you see a glitch, you download the patch to fix it, and you move on. The phone itself is totally fine. But shame. Shame is a virus that attacks the core operating system.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And the brain, realizing the entire operating system is under threat of being wiped out, just forces a hard shutdown of the whole computer to stop the virus from spreading. So the denial, the twisting of reality, the evasion that's the forced shutdown, they are shutting down reality to protect the motherboard.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. The shutdown is automated. It completely bypasses conscious thought.
That explains so much.
And if we look at the developmental research, specifically the groundbreaking work of Dr. Lindsay Gibson on emotionally immature parents, we can trace exactly where this faulty operating system comes from.
Because people don't just wake up one day with a terror of accountability, right?
No, it is forged in childhood environments where healthy emotional regulation just wasn't modeled and where mistakes were punished rather than processed.
Let's spend some time on Gibson's 4 types of emotionally immature parents. Because for anyone listening who has dealt with this, tracing it back to these childhood dynamics is often like a massive moment of clarity.
It really connects the dots.
Whether it explains their own upbringing or helps them understand the toxic person they are currently dealing with. So let's start with the first type, the emotional parent.
The emotional parent is defined by instability. They are erratic, they're volatile, and they're highly reactive to stress.
Like constantly up and down.
Yes. They might swing wildly between being completely over-involved and enmeshed with the child to sudden, terrifying emotional withdrawal.
Oh, wow. So for a child growing up in this environment, life is basically an exercise in walking on eggshells.
Because you never know which version of the parent is coming home.
Exactly.
So the child learns hypervigilance. They become experts at constantly monitoring the parent's shifting moods, reading micro-expressions, just trying to anticipate the next explosion so they can manage it.
And how does that affect them later in life?
As adults, children of emotional parents often develop extreme, people-pleasing behaviors. They have a profound distrust of emotional stability. So they are constantly trying to manage the emotions of everyone around them to feel safe.
That makes total sense. Okay, then you have the driven parent. This is the parent who demands absolute perfection. They are compulsively goal-oriented.
Right. And in a driven parent's home, love is highly conditional. The child feels valued only for their external achievements, their grades, their athletic performance, how well they reflect on the family image.
So there is absolutely zero room for failure or vulnerability.
None. If you fail, you lose love, period. And this breeds severe imposter syndrome and rigid perfectionism as a defense mechanism.
So a mistake is literally dangerous.
Exactly. The adult child of a driven parent lives in constant terror that a single mistake will expose them as worthless. They cannot accept blame because to them, a mistake means they're completely unlovable.
Okay, the third type Gibson identifies as the passive parent. These parents are highly conflict avoidant. They are hands-off, sometimes to the point of severe neglect.
Yes. They might turn a blind eye to obvious family crises or even abuse simply to keep the peace.
Just burying their head in the sand?
And this creates a very unique kind of developmental trauma. The child is left feeling completely unprotected and emotionally abandoned.
So what's the defense mechanism there?
The defense mechanism that often develops here is learned helplessness. The adult child gives up easily, they avoid difficult decisions, and they rely heavily on others for emotional validation.
Because they were never taught how to handle things themselves?
Right. Because they were never taught how to self-advocate or navigate conflict safely, they avoid taking responsibility for their own lives. They just drift, hoping someone else will fix things.
And finally, we have the rejecting parent. Cold, aloof, viewing the child as an annoying burden rather than a human being.
This is perhaps the most deeply damaging to a child's core identity. The child internalizes the message that their very existence and their basic emotional needs are a source of disgust to the person who is supposed to love them most.
That is just brutal.
It is. As adults, this manifests as severe emotional detachment, profound intimacy avoidance, and rapid withdrawal during conflicts. They learn early on that to seek closeness is to invite rejection, so they build an impenetrable wall.
So if you are listening to this and you are exhausted by the chronic irresponsibility of someone in your life, like the colleague who constantly misses deadlines and blames the software, or the partner who blows through your boundaries and says you're overreacting, you have to realize it isn't just a quirky personality flaw.
No, not at all.
It is a deeply ingrained, almost biological emotional phobia.
It is a phobia of shame. We see this validated in behavioral science and clinical comorbidities as well.
Oh, really? Like what?
For instance, consider individuals with avoidant personality disorder. For them, this evasion of responsibility and connection is a core pathology driven by an intense, paralyzing fear of social rejection.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or look at how it intersects with something like ADHD.
I was actually wondering about that. How does ADHD fit into this evasion of accountability?
When an individual has ADHD, they often struggle with executive functioning deficits. This means they might genuinely forget tasks, struggle to shift attention, or have what we call time blindness.
Right.
Now, imagine a child with undiagnosed ADHD growing up with a driven parent or an emotional parent. They are met with a lifetime of constant criticism from parents and teachers for things their brain genuinely struggles to do.
So they're constantly hearing, you're lazy, you're not trying, you don't care.
Exactly. Over time, the individual develops learned helplessness. They begin to treat all responsibilities and any conversations about accountability as emotional danger zones.
Because it's a trap.
Yes, they avoid, they deny, or they deflect because in their experience, trying has always resulted in failure and shame.
So we've established the foundation here. We understand that they are terrified. They are frantically trying to avoid the virus of shame wiping their hard drive. But here's where we have to look at the extreme measures the psyche takes.
And they are extreme.
Because when shame absolutely cannot be processed by an immature mind, the brain doesn't just shut down quietly. It goes on the offensive.
It absolutely does.
It builds these rigid and frankly terrifying walls to protect itself. And this is where we cross the threshold out of everyday immaturity and into the clinical realm of personality pathology.
We are entering the territory of concepts like splitting and vulnerable narcissism.
Let's talk about splitting because I find this cognitive distortion so fascinating. What is actually happening in the brain when someone splits?
Well, developmentally, splitting is normal in toddlers. The toddler thinks mommy is all good when she gives him a cookie, and mommy is an all-bad monster when she takes the toy away.
Right. There's no gray area for a 2-year-old.
Exactly. But a healthy adult mind learns integration. Splitting, in an adult, is the failure to integrate the positive and negative qualities of a person or a situation into a cohesive, realistic whole.
So the nuanced shades of gray just vanish.
Completely. In the mind of someone who is splitting, people are either flawless, idealized angels, or they are malicious, devalued villains. There is no middle ground.
You cannot be a good person who made a mistake.
No. You are either a saint or a demon.
It sounds like a camera lens that suddenly loses its depth of field. You know when you take a portrait and you want the background blurred out so only the subject is in focus?
Yeah.
But with splitting, it's like the emotional lens is broken. It can only focus on one extreme at a time. The brain just cannot process a flawed but generally good person.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the lack of emotional depth perception. We see this defense mechanism heavily utilized in borderline personality disorder as a desperate shield against their core fear of abandonment.
How does that play out in BPD?
Well, an individual with BPD might interpret a totally neutral social cue, Let's say you take 20 minutes longer to text back than usual because you were driving as a massive intentional rejection.
Just from a delayed text.
Yes. Their hypersensitivity triggers the split. Yesterday, you were their flawless savior, the best person they ever met. Today, because you were slightly late, the lens flips. You are now a malicious traitor who never cared about them at all.
And this cognitive distortion, this splitting, is also a foundational pillar of narcissism.
It is.
Now, I want to pause here because the cultural conversation around narcissism is everywhere right now. I think when most people hear the word, they picture the overt, grandiose type.
Right, the stereotype.
Yeah, the loud, arrogant CEO, the person taking 100 selfies, the braggart who physically needs to dominate the room.
That represents grandiose narcissism. But clinical sources point out there are three core cognitive processes underlying all pathological narcissism. A grandiose sense of self-worth, a chronic victim mentality, and this black and white splitting we just discussed.
And these three traits can present in a much more insidious, confusing way known as vulnerable narcissism, right? Sometimes referred to as covert narcissism. Covert narcissism is so disorienting because it doesn't look like arrogance on the surface. Vulnerable narcissists are often introverted. They can appear deeply insecure, they are hypersensitive to criticism, and instead of bragging, they chronically play the martyr.
The unconscious mechanism driving a vulnerable narcissist is a wild, agonizing oscillation between grandiosity and intense shame.
Oscillation, like they swing back and forth.
Yes, a vulnerable narcissist secretly harbors the exact same core belief as the grandiose narcissist. They believe they are fundamentally superior, unique, and entitled to special treatment.
Wow.
But because they lack the thick skin and social dominance of the grandiose narcissist, they are terrified of being exposed or ridiculed. They live in a state of quiet resentment that the world hasn't recognized their hidden genius.
So what happens when you confront a vulnerable narcissist? Let's say you just offer a tiny piece of constructive criticism.
When they are criticized, even slightly, they experience extreme emotional flooding. Their fragile, hidden ego shatters. And to survive the psychological pain of that shattering, they instantly externalize the blame.
So it's never their fault.
Never. It is the cruel, unappreciative world's fault.
Okay, hang on. I have to challenge this logic for a second. If a vulnerable narcissist is constantly feeling shame and self-doubt, and they are so deeply sensitive, why don't they just apologize?
It seems like they would, right?
Yeah. If you feel terrible about yourself, wouldn't a normal human impulse be to seek connection, say, I'm so sorry, and make amends to feel secure again?
That is the ultimate psychological paradox of this disorder, and it is vital for listeners to grasp. It's what clinicians sometimes describe as the raging pout.
The raging pout.
Yes. You have to realize that individuals with high narcissistic traits remain developmentally stuck in what is called primary narcissism.
Meaning what, exactly?
This means they do not view their partners, their children, or their friends as separate, fully realized human beings with their own internal worlds.
Wait, really? How do they view them?
They view them as mirrors or appliances.
Appliances.
Yes, your sole psychological purpose in their life is to regulate their self-esteem and reflect back their idealized image. Think about a toaster.
Okay.
You don't consider a toaster's feelings, you just expect it to make toast. When it stops making toast, you don't empathize with it, you get angry at it.
Oh, wow.
An apology requires empathy. It requires you to hold space for the other person's separate reality and pain. The narcissist's ego is completely bankrupt. It literally cannot afford to acknowledge your separate reality because doing so would mean acknowledging their own flaw.
I see. They can't admit the toaster is broken because that would mean they bought a bad toaster.
Precisely.
So why does this pattern repeat so endlessly in toxic relationships? Why is it a loop?
It loops because of a tragic catch-22. The narcissist desperately needs external validation from you to survive. They need you to be the mirror.
Right.
But their hypersensitivity guarantees that they will eventually perceive a slight or a criticism from you, whether real or imagined.
So it's a ticking clock.
Exactly. The moment they perceive that slight, you threaten their fragile ego. They split, they devalue you, they externalize the blame to protect themselves, and then, once they feel secure again, they need the mirror back.
Oh, man.
So the cycle of idealization and devaluation starts all over again.
So we know why they are terrified of accountability. We understand the fragile ego, the splitting, the vulnerable narcissism, and this inability to see other people as separate humans.
Yes.
But let's look at the actual point of impact. What exactly happens in the room the moment you confront them? How does this internal fragility manifest as an external attack on you?
This brings us to the weaponization of confrontation. To understand how someone can look you in the eye, hurt you, and walk away without feeling immense, crushing guilt, we have to look at Albert Bandura's theory of moral disengagement.
Moral disengagement.
Bandura was a pioneer in social cognitive theory, and he identified 8 specific cognitive mechanisms that allow human beings to perpetrate harm without experiencing self-condemnation.
This is basically the psychology of how people convince themselves that ethical standards apply to everyone else, but not to them.
Exactly. It's the suspension of conscience.
So what are the main mechanisms used in toxic relationships?
Let's focus on a few of the most common ones. First is moral justification. This is when they frame their harmful conduct as serving a higher moral purpose.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A parent who verbally abuses a child might justify it by saying, "I have to be tough on them to prepare them for a cruel world." They turn their cruelty into a noble sacrifice.
Wow. Okay, another mechanism is euphemistic labeling, which is essentially sanitizing the language, right?
Exactly.
They swap out words to make the behavior sound benign. For instance, they won't admit to emotional cruelty or insulting you. They'll call it brutal honesty.
Right. I'm just telling it like it is. I'm a straight shooter. By changing the label, they completely remove the moral weight.
That's incredibly manipulative.
It is. Then there's the distortion of consequences, where they actively minimize the perceived harm. You come to them crying and they say, "It wasn't that bad, you're overreacting, it was just a joke."
So they are literally commanding you not to feel the pain they caused?
Yes, they invalidate your reality. And perhaps the most frequent one is the attribution of blame. This is where they locate the causal weight of their action entirely on the victim.
Look what you made me do.
Precisely. I wouldn't have yelled at you if you hadn't provoked me. I wouldn't have lied if you weren't so controlling. They position themselves as a passive object reacting to your provocation.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the most devastating behavioral sequence we are covering in this deep dive.
It does.
If there is one concept from today that will change how you view arguments forever, it is this. We are talking about DARVO.
DARVO. It's an acronym coined by trauma psychologist Dr. Jennifer Freyd. It stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim, and Offender. It's an absolute masterclass in manipulation.
Let's walk through this agonizingly slowly because it's so important. Imagine a highly relatable scenario. Let's say your partner completely blew off a major anniversary. You aren't screaming. You sit them down and say, "I'm really hurt that you forgot our anniversary yesterday. Walk me through the DARVO sequence."
Step 1 is deny. They outright reject reality. In this scenario, they might say, "I didn't forget, we agreed last month not to make a big deal out of it this year."
Wait, but you know for a fact you never agreed to that.
Exactly. This isn't just a simple lie. It is a calculated mechanism designed to destabilize your grip on reality. You start second-guessing your own memory.
That's classic gaslighting.
It is. Then comes step 2, which is attack. Once they've denied the event and put you off balance, they shift the spotlight away from their behavior and onto your character flaws.
So how do they attack?
They might say, "You are obsessed with dates. You're always trying to trap me in these petty arguments. You're overly sensitive and exhausting." They attack your credibility.
And then comes the grand finale.
Yes. Step 3. Reverse victim and offender. They seamlessly reposition themselves as the ultimate victim of your quote-unquote unreasonable demands.
I work 60 hours a week to support this family. I am under immense stress, and I come home to this interrogation. I can never do anything right for you. I have to walk on eggshells in my own home.
That's exactly it. Suddenly, they are the wounded party, seeking sympathy, and you are the oppressive abuser.
It is essentially psychological judo. The manipulator uses the victim's own momentum against them.
It really is.
Think about it. You approach them with empathy, a willingness to self-reflect, and a desire for a fair resolution. The manipulator grabs hold of your desire for fairness and flips you onto your back. You walked into that room to say, "Ouch, you hurt me," and 20 minutes later you leave saying, "I'm so sorry I made you feel bad about hurting me."
And the impact on victims who endured this repeatedly is profound. Dr. Freyd explains this through betrayal trauma theory.
Let's get into that. What is happening to the victim?
When a victim is dependent on the abuser, whether that dependence is emotional, financial, or systemic, like a child relying on a parent, the victim faces a terrifying dilemma. Recognizing the abuse actually threatens the bond they need to survive.
So what does their brain do?
The victim's brain utilizes a survival mechanism called adaptive blindness.
They literally block it out.
Yes, they dissociate from the reality of the abuse. To preserve the necessary bond, The victim's brain decides it is safer to blame itself.
Wow. So Darvo actively weaponizes this exact vulnerability.
Exactly. It forces the victim to internalize the blame, to believe they are crazy just to keep the peace and maintain the relationship.
But there is an even deeper, more chilling lesson here about Darvo. It's not just an automatic, knee-jerk defensive reaction in a private argument, is it?
No, it's not. It is a highly calculated narrative shift that reaches far beyond the two people in the room. What makes Darvo so systemically devastating is that it enlists third-party observers.
Explain how that works.
When a manipulator uses Darvo in a larger context, say, in a family system, during a meeting with an HR department, or worst of all, in family court, they perform the victim role so flawlessly and with such conviction that the institution or the bystanders start to view the actual victim as the aggressor.
That is horrifying.
It is. The actual victim who is traumatized might appear frantic, angry, or confused, but the Darvo perpetrator appears calm, long-suffering, and bewildered by this, unprovoked attack.
So they weaponize the system itself.
Yes, Darvo thrives by increasing the psychological, social, and financial cost of confrontation so astronomically high that the true victim simply gives up in exhaustion.
That is incredibly heavy, and it perfectly explains why you can feel completely isolated and gaslit even when you have hard evidence that you were wronged.
Because the narrative has been stolen from you.
Right, because Darvo doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is a tractor beam. It successfully pulls you and everyone around you into a highly predictable, incredibly toxic role play.
Yes, and this systemic trap was brilliantly mapped out decades ago in 1968 by psychiatrist Stephen Cartman. It is universally known as the Cartman drama triangle.
The drama triangle is one of those concepts that once you see it, you will see it at every Thanksgiving dinner and in every office dynamic for the rest of your life.
You really can't unsee it.
So there are three roles on this triangle.
Yep.
The victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. Let's break this down.
Let's look at how the trap is set. High conflict, emotionally mature individuals usually initiate this systemic trap by adopting the victim role. Now, a very important caveat here, we are not talking about an actual victim of a crime, a natural disaster, or genuine abuse.
Right, this is different.
We are talking about a psychological stance. We are talking about someone who performs victimhood as a lifestyle.
So what does that performance look like?
They project intense, chronic helplessness.
Yeah.
They complain constantly about how unfair the world is. My boss hates me, my ex ruined my life, nothing ever goes my way.
But they don't actually do anything about it.
Crucially, no. They take absolutely no productive action to change their circumstances. They reject solutions. They just broadcast their misery.
And they broadcast this helplessness specifically to recruit the second role on the triangle, the rescuer.
Exactly. They scan their environment looking for a highly empathetic, often codependent person to step in. The rescuer's default stance in life is, let me help you, let me fix this, let me take on your burden.
Let's talk about the subconscious payoffs here, because nobody plays these roles unless there is a psychological reward.
True.
For the victim, the payoff is obvious. They get to entirely avoid adult responsibility. They never have to face the anxiety of trying and failing because someone else is paying their bills or making their apologies or doing their work. But what about the rescuer? Why does someone volunteer for that exhaustion?
The rescuer gets a massive, hidden self-esteem boost by playing the hero. Focusing obsessively on the victim's crisis serves a distinct psychological purpose.
What's the purpose?
It allows the rescuer to completely avoid looking at their own anxieties, their own failed relationships, or their own unhealed wounds. If I'm busy saving you, I don't have to look at myself.
Oh, wow. It's a distraction.
Exactly. But the triangle doesn't stay static. The roles rotate. That is the twist of the drama triangle.
How does it rotate?
The rotation is inevitable. Eventually, the rescuer becomes exhausted. You simply cannot carry the weight of two adults indefinitely. The rescuer's own needs are being completely ignored, and they begin to build resentment.
Which is only natural.
This resentment simmers until one day the rescuer snaps. They start criticizing the victim. I do everything for you. I pay your rent, I fix your car, and you do nothing to help yourself.
And in that moment of anger, the rescuer has stepped into the third role, the persecutor.
Yes.
And the original victim looks at the former rescuer, feels deeply betrayed by this sudden anger, claims they are being abused, and goes out to seek a brand new rescuer.
Yes, the cycle reboots.
And when they find that new rescuer, they paint you, the person who tried to help them for years, as the evil persecutor. It is a vicious, endless merry-go-round.
It is a closed loop of dysfunction. and it destroys relationships because authentic connection is impossible when you are interacting with scripts and roles instead of real vulnerable people.
Now, I have to step in here and challenge something because I know what the listener is thinking. It's very easy to see why the persecutor and the victim roles are toxic. But what is inherently wrong with being the rescuer?
It's the most common question.
Right. Isn't helping someone a good thing? Shouldn't we want to support our siblings, our friends, the people we love when they are struggling?
Answering that requires a profound shift in perspective. Here's the revelation in the context of the drama triangle. The rescuer is not a helper. The rescuer is an enabler.
Explain the difference between helping and enabling.
Helping is empowering someone to do something they are temporarily unable to do while they take active steps to recover. Rescuing is doing things for someone that they're perfectly capable of doing themselves.
Oh, that is a huge distinction.
By constantly stepping in to solve the problem, the rescuer actively strips the victim of their autonomy. You are preventing them from experiencing the natural consequences of their actions.
Which is how people actually learn.
Yes, experiencing consequences is the only mechanism through which adults actually learn, hit rock bottom, and decide to grow.
So the rescuer's hidden motive is rarely pure altruism.
Clinically speaking, it is often a codependent need to be needed. It is frequently rooted in the rescuer's own childhood attachment wounds.
Like what kind of wounds?
Perhaps they grew up in a home where they were parentified, where they learned that their only value to an unstable parent was in being useful, in cleaning up messes, in keeping the peace. They equate being needed with being loved.
Wow. So by rescuing them, you are actually keeping them sick so that you can feel safe and valuable. You are participating in the pathology.
Precisely, you become a co-author of the dysfunction.
So, if confronting an evasive person triggers the manipulation of Darvo and attempting to help them traps you in the drama triangle as an enabler, what do you actually do?
That is the ultimate question.
How do you escape the gravitational pull of a toxic person when you can't simply pack a bag and walk away? Let's say you share custody of a child with this person, or they are your department head, or they are an elderly parent.
This brings us to one of the most widely discussed yet frequently misunderstood clinical strategies in trauma recovery today. The gray rock method.
The gray rock method. The underlying idea here is that you become as uninteresting, flat, and unremarkable as a gray rock on the ground. You starve the toxic person of the emotional supply they are seeking.
What is happening behaviorally is that you deliberately stop giving them access to your interior emotional state.
What does that look like?
You answer questions factually, briefly, and with zero inflection. You don't share good news because they will find a way to ruin it. You don't share bad news because they will weaponize it. And most importantly, you do not react visibly when they provoke you.
Let's give a concrete example. What does gray rock sound like in practice?
Let's take a co-parenting handoff, which is notoriously volatile. Your ex is trying to pick a fight about alimony or insulting your new partner. Instead of defending yourself, you talk about logistics only, in a completely flat tone.
So you just say something like, her backpack is in the trunk, she needs to be at soccer at 4 p.m., her inhaler is in the front pocket.
That's it. You do not take the bait.
No weather on your face. You give them nothing to react to.
Exactly. Because, as we established earlier, manipulative people are actively reading your face for signs of distress. Your visible anger, your frustration, or your tears aren't alarming to them. They are reinforcing.
They prove that they have power over you.
Yes, they prove that they can still control your emotional thermostat. Gray rock removes that data stream completely.
But there is a crucial nuance here that we need to clarify, because this can sound a lot like another term we hear a lot, stonewalling.
Yes, very important distinction.
Is gray rock the same thing as stonewalling? Because stonewalling is universally recognized as a toxic communication pattern in a marriage, right?
That is a critical distinction to make.
Yes.
Stonewalling is an offensive weapon. It is used in mutual conflict to punish, silence, or control a partner by withdrawing.
It's aggressive.
Yes. Gray rock, on the other hand, is a one-directional protective boundary. You use it exclusively against an unsafe person. You are not trying to punish them by becoming flat. You are putting up a shield to protect your interior life from someone who has repeatedly proven they will weaponize your vulnerability.
But here is where we hit the psychological paradox of this entire episode. And this is the hidden emotional cost that you rarely see mentioned in internet infographics when they recommend gray rock.
Yes, this is so important to discuss. Relying on the work of interpersonal neurobiologist Dan Siegel, we have to look closely at the danger of long-term gray rocking. Siegel talks about the window of tolerance.
The window of tolerance.
Right. And there's a very fine line between emotional containment and emotional suppression.
What's the difference between the two?
Containment is the strategic, deliberate regulation of what you show on the outside. You feel the anger, you acknowledge it internally, but you consciously choose not to express it in the moment.
Okay, and suppression.
Suppression is when you sever your internal experience from your conscious awareness entirely.
Meaning you pretend you aren't feeling anything at all, even to yourself.
Right. And when containment bleeds into suppression over months or years, the emotional experience doesn't just evaporate.
It goes somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
The body keeps the score. The stress gets encoded in your nervous system.
Let's bring in a real-life clinical manifestation of this from the sources we gather. There's this incredibly poignant case study of Nadia, a 34-year-old architect.
I remember reading about her.
Nadia had to co-parent a young daughter, and she also worked in the exact same tight-knit industry as her ex, who was a classic, covertly narcissistic individual. Nadia read about Grey Rock, and she became a master at it.
She really did.
She rehearsed her emails to sound like a corporate robot. She stayed perfectly flat during handoffs while he verbally berated her. But 3 years later, she ended up in therapy. Not because the method failed to keep him at bay, but because she had entirely lost herself.
Nadia's story is heartbreakingly common for trauma survivors. She told her therapist, "I can't find my edges anymore. I know I have feelings about things. I know I used to be passionate. I just can't locate the emotions anymore."
That's terrifying. What was happening to Nadia psychologically?
By constantly, rigidly suppressing her authentic emotional reality to stay safe from her ex's provocations, she began to internalize an old childhood belief that her true self was inherently dangerous or unacceptable.
So she just shut it all down.
She lost her edges. The numbing began to spread like an infection. She became numb even in her safe relationships. She couldn't feel joy when playing with her daughter. She felt emotionally detached from her new partner.
It just bled into everything.
Yes. She had conditioned her nervous system to believe that feeling anything deeply was a literal threat to her survival.
I think of it this way. Grey Rock is like putting on a heavy lead-lined hazmat suit. It is absolutely vital, and it will quite literally save your life if you have to walk through a radioactive room.
You have to wear it in the room.
You must put it on. But if you forget to take the suit off when you get home, if you wear it to dinner, if you wear it while playing with your kids, if you wear it to bed, you will eventually suffocate yourself.
That analogy perfectly captures the clinical risk. The hazmat suit is a survival tool. It is not meant to be your skin.
And taking a step back to look at the broader systemic lens here, there is a tremendously unfair societal burden embedded in all of this, isn't there? Especially regarding who is usually expected to do the gray rocking.
There is. Culturally, women are overwhelmingly socialized from birth to manage the emotional volatility of the people around them.
Just smooth things over.
To keep the peace, to not be, quote-unquote, too much, to manage a partner's mood before it escalates into a crisis. Grey Rock, while it is a brilliant and necessary tactic, is ultimately asking a person to perform emotional invisibility in order to be safe.
Right.
It is a tactical adaptation to someone else's unhealed pathology.
So what does this all mean for the listener who is wearing the hazmat suit right now? It means Grey Rock is a bridge, not a destination.
Exactly.
It buys you the critical time and peace you need while you modify a custody agreement, or while you transfer to a new department at work, or while you do the deep trauma therapy required so that their provocations stop triggering your nervous system. But you deserve a life where you do not have to perform emotional invisibility to be safe.
You do. You deserve to exist fully in all your vivid colors, with all your messy, beautiful emotions, without being punished for it.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the immense journey we've been on today. We started deep in the fragile, shame-filled core of the emotionally immature mind, understanding why the simple act of accountability feels like a literal death sentence to them.
We looked at the cognitive dissonance of that moment.
Right. And then we explored the ridged walls of splitting, where people are only angels or demons, and uncovered the hidden fragility driving vulnerable narcissism. We decoded the weaponized psychological judo of Darvo, mapped out the systemic trap of the Cartman drama triangle, and the danger of being an enabler.
And finally, we examined the heavy, life-saving armor of the Grey Rock method and the real cost of wearing it.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground. And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to ask you for a final thought. What is the ultimate takeaway for the listener?
I want to leave you with a final paradigm-shifting realization to mull over in the days ahead. We've spent this entire time talking about how these toxic defense mechanisms target you, how they hurt you, and how they manipulate your reality.
Yeah.
But consider this. What if the very empathy, the deep self-reflection, and the genuine desire for harmony that makes you a deeply loving, beautiful human being, what if that is the exact machinery these toxic defense mechanisms are specifically designed to exploit? Your empathy is not a weakness. It is a profound, beautiful strength. But in the presence of someone who fundamentally refuses to take responsibility for their own actions, that empathy must be guarded fiercely. You cannot heal someone else's shame by absorbing their blame.
You cannot heal someone else's shame by absorbing their blame. That is powerful. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the human psyche. We hope this empowers you to step out of the triangle, to recognize the manipulation for what it is, to take off the hazmat suit when you're finally safe, and to reclaim your reality, because you deserve to stand on solid ground.